Hey, welcome back, guys. We're going to do something a little different we've never done before, and that's kind of give a not so much a review, but our opinion on some of the stuff that we bought and have been using for the last few years. This week, we're going to talk about our wood stove and our Toyo stove, and let you know what we think the pros and cons are of them. So let us know if you have a cabin or if you heat with wood stove, what kind of wood stove you guys use, and if you like it, and what you don't like about it. But yeah, let's get this thing started, and we'll tell you what we use. Alright, so we got the wood inside. We're going to get the stove going, but first I wanted to talk about our stove and the model and everything. So this is not a, hey, our stove's the best stove. It's just the stove that we have, and I'm going to run through it. So these are Hearthstone. It's a soapstone stove. That means it's got these little soapstone plates on the top. And basically, the stove heats up. It heats these stones up, and then we'll get into the pros of that later and the cons of it. But this is the Castleton 8030. The max BTUs on this is 45,000. This will heat a room size up to 1,500 square feet, and the burn time for this is approximately 8 hours. The firebox capability, I got some notes. The firebox capability is 1.9 cubic feet, and the max log size in this is 18 inches. So let's get into the pros and the cons of this thing. I kind of want to start off with the cons first, but I'm going to start with the pros first. The pros are, it's free heat. I mean, we've got trees all around us. We hardly ever even have to cut down live trees unless we want to, unless we're making a project and need to get rid of that tree, because we get so many blowdowns and standing dead. And so typically we just wait for something to fall down, and then we'll cut it up. Or if it's a standing dead, we'll fall it and then utilize it. Now, another pro for this is that once these soapstones heat up, they just keep radiating heat. Even after the fire has completely gone out, the stones will keep radiating heat for a good little while. So that's a good pro for this thing. So now let's get into the cons. And I don't think the cons outweigh the pros, but I have more cons listed. So the cons to these soapstones is that it takes longer for this thing to start producing heat. So like last week's video, we came into our cold cabin. It takes a good hour for this thing to really heat up and start producing heat. Everything else is just internally heating, but once it gets heated up and starts producing heat, then it just goes. It's like any other wood stove. But like I said, the pro to that is, once the fire dies, it will keep radiating heat after the fire's already gone and out. Wood stoves, as opposed to what we're going to talk about in a little bit, and that's our oil stove. Wood stove takes manual labor. I mean, there's no easy way around that. You gotta cut trees down. You gotta split your wood. So there's a lot more manual labor involved in keeping this thing going. You also have to, like we just showed at the very beginning, you have to constantly replenish your firewood inside your cabin. So we have firewood outside, and we're working on a new wood stove or wood shed. That's why we have everything in little piles everywhere. But yeah, you just constantly have to resupply inside here. So we try to keep like 2.5, 3 days worth of wood inside. And then that way, once we bring it in, it starts to dry out even more, because we live in a really wet area. So it just helps dry it out even more before we put it inside here. Another thing is, as opposed to the Toyo stove that we're going to talk about, is you have to clean the chimney of these things. If you don't clean the chimney, then you run the risk of having a chimney fire, and that's no good. So that's another added aspect that you have to think about when you're running a wood stove. Gunner came to see me. Hi, Bubba. So another con for this thing also, and my wife just brought this point up, is that it's heavier. It's heavier than your normal wood stove because it's got these little bricks, the soapstones that makes up the stove. So I don't know the weight of it, but I'm gonna leave a description for the Toyo Stove and this stove so you can do your own research. But it was heavy. We have a tractor now, but we had to, at the time didn't, and we had to get our neighbor, and Craig, hi Craig, he brought over his tractor to help us get this up onto our porch so we could get it inside the cabin. I mean, this thing, I don't know how much it weighs, but it's probably 500 pounds or more. So there is that. But anyways, yeah, the only other thing that I want to say about this is that once you get it going, it's super easy to keep the fire going in this thing. And another thing that I want to talk about because of some comments last week was what can happen, especially in our area, because we live right on the beach and we face the east, and we normally get a predominant east wind. So a lot of times we can get smoke blown back into our cabin if we don't start a small fire and build that small fire up. So we have to like warm the chimney up so we get a really good draw first, and then we can put on our heavier wood. But we also have a I don't know what it's called. It's a directional chimney cap, and basically it's like a weather vane with a big shark fin on it. So when the wind blows, it's tilted like this, so it's got an open area and the gap where the smoke comes out, and it shields over the entrance of your chimney so the wind doesn't go down it. But even with that, like if we just try to throw wood in here and start like your typical, if you're in the mountains, wood stove, if we try to do that, the whole place would be filled up with smoke. So anyways, let's go talk about the Toyo Stove. And yeah, if you're interested, the description will be down below, and you can give it a look. Give it a look-ski. Alright, so our other heat source is the Toyo Stove. I got some notes because I want to give you out some specifics on here. But anyways, the main pros is there's no chimney. You don't have to go out with like a 3-inch or 6-inch chimney and go up all the way past your roof. This thing vents straight out the side of your wall. I'll link a little video that we did when we installed it. Basically, you just drill like a little hole through the side of your cabin, and it just vents straight out that. So that was a pro for us because we didn't want to have 2 big chimneys sticking up out the side of our cabin. The other pro for this thing is it just regulates heat. You can't see it, but it's got a little wire that goes up, and it's like a heat sensor, like a temperature gauge. And so if you set this thing on 68 or 70, then it will stay on at 68, 70 degrees. It may get a little warmer, or it may get a little cooler. Hey, get out of there. Sorry, Gunner. It's being a bad boy. But it's just set the temperature that you want and forget about it. It's just going to stay at that temperature. And the installation is super easy. So it was just a quick 3-inch hole. I think it was a 3-inch hole out the side of the cabin, and then hook everything up. It's gravity fed, so there's a fuel tank outside. We got a 20-gallon fuel tank, and it's just gravity fed into the back of this, and that's it. So let's go into some cons. The cons is it runs on electricity. Now they make oil stoves that don't run on electricity, but those you have to run a chimney. And that's why we went with the Toyo, because we didn't want to run a chimney. We just wanted to go out. And since we've got generators and batteries and soon, hopefully, solar, electricity is not an issue for us. So we went with the Toyo Stove. The other con is that it burns fuel. So as opposed to the wood stove, where you cut your trees down. I mean, unless you don't have trees to cut down and you're buying like cords of wood, we just cut our trees down, our fine blowdown, and cut that up and split it, and everything's free except for the gas in your splitter and your chainsaw. So those are the only two cons really on this thing. I mean, we've had this 2 years now. Is that right? Or we're on our second year now. This is our second winter with it, and we love it. It's pretty cool.
We've almost spoiled ourselves.
Yeah. The other pro is, and we'll probably talk about this somewhere else, is when you want to buy insurance for your cabin, a lot of the places don't want to insure a cabin that only has a wood stove. So if you have a oil stove, then you open up to more insurance companies that will insure your cabin. All right, so let's talk about some specifics. This is the Toyo Stove Laser 560. It's got 3 settings: high, medium, and low. On high, it puts out 22,000 BTUs. Medium's 15,000 BTUs, and low is 8,000 BTUs. So for gallons, how much fuel does it use? High, it uses 0.165 gallons per hour. Medium's 0.113 gallons per hour, and low is 0.060 gallons per hour. And I can tell you, unless we get down into the single digits, this thing typically always runs on low. So really, once it heats up, it stays on the low setting throughout the whole day. And like I said, unless you live in the interior, or like we get down into the single digits. But if you're in the negative 20s or going to move somewhere where it's negative 20, you might want maybe think about getting a bigger unit that doesn't have to work so hard to keep this size of a cabin warmed up. So for fuel, this thing can run on kerosene. We run number 1 diesel in it, and it can also run on low sulfur diesel and heating oil. The electric rating, so when you fire this thing up, it goes through a preheating stage, and during that preheating stage it uses 240 watts, and that's probably, I don't know, just a couple of minutes before it starts burning. And then when it starts burning, it uses 40 watts of electricity. And then this particular unit, it's sized for at 0 degrees, it can heat up a 920 square foot cabin or house, and at 20 degrees it can heat up a 1,100 square foot cabin or house. So that's the specifics on it. Like I said, we really have enjoyed this thing. It's just so easy to just not mess with the fireplace and just fire this up. But like my wife said, we are kind of getting a little spoiled with it.
Especially at night. We have to sleep through the night.
Yeah, because I mean, if you've never ran a wood stove, typically in the middle of the night, you're going to have to wake up and come down at least once to put more wood on the fire. And if not, then you're going to wake up to a cold ass cabin. So with this, you don't have to do that. It just stays 70 degrees all night long. Actually, you can even program it so if you say you go to bed at 10, you can program it so it will drop the temperature down to, like, say if we're running it at 70 and we want to drop it down to 65 at night, then it'll do it all on its own. You don't have to worry about it, so you're consuming less fuel. And typically, if you have it set up and you never turn it off, and you set the timer on it, it goes through a cleaning period every night at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it self-cleans itself and everything. It's a pretty amazing little machine. So I'm going to leave a link for down in the description for the wood stove and the Toyo stove, so you guys can go and check them out if you're interested in it at all. But like I said, this year we're kind of going to do some, I don't want to call them reviews because we're not sponsored. We bought all the stuff with our own money, but these are the things that we've been using for the last few years and the last couple years. So, yeah, we thought we would just kind of give you what we're using, how we like them or dislike them, and let you guys go do your own research. All right, so that was our comparison between what the two things that we use for heat here, the wood stove and the oil stove. But we also wanted to share a story with you that happened, well, we're in February now, but it was in mid-December or late December. There was a guy here in Alaska, and he was originally from like Utah or someplace. But anyways, he had a cabin, and he was out on his own in the middle of nowhere, him and his dog. And he had a chimney fire, and that's something that we didn't talk about. But so if you leave your wood stove, if your wood's wet and you leave your wood stove like dampered, like you're not giving it all the air it can get, you can build up like what they call creosote. And if you get enough creosote in there, you can actually start an internal fire in your chimney, and that's not good.
No, and that's what happened to him. And unfortunately, his cabin burned down.
Yeah, so he was, like I said, in the middle, 20 miles from nowhere. We'll leave the story down below as well. He was nowhere near anybody, and his cabin, he woke up and, his cabin was burned down, and he barely got out himself.
Unfortunately, his dog passed away in the fire.
Yeah, I think he said that he thought his dog was outside already. Because, if you've ever seen fire stuff, you know that the smoke just...
It's black.
Yeah.
You just can't see anything.
So he got out, and he survived 3 weeks because everything burnt down except for his...
Freezing temperatures.
Yeah, I mean, it was December. This is in the interior, too, so he was probably super cold. But the only thing he had left from his cabin was his wood stove. And he built a little make-to shelter around that wood stove and kept that thing going to keep him warm. But it took 3 weeks. He made like a SOS out in the snow. I don't remember what it was of, or if he just stomped it out in the snow, SOS. And finally, a plane flew by and...
Well, no, they had finally somebody did a welfare check on him and said,
"Oh,
we hadn't heard from him from 3 weeks. Could you please go out and check?"
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty sad story. He lost everything. He lost his dog, and he said by the end, he's glad his bullets
burnt up in the fire
because he was getting pretty desperate at the end.
Yeah.
Living off grid is no joke. Accidents happen, and when they do, in parts of Alaska, it can devastating consequences. So.
Yeah, the line between life and death in the remote areas is pretty thin line.
Yeah.
So if something goes bad, it can go bad real fast. So we just wanted to add that story at the end of the video, not to depress anybody, but just to, the people that are thinking about doing this, it's just something that you have to keep in the back of your mind that stuff like this happens, and it can happen to you. So hopefully we haven't had any. We've only had one issue, and that was. We've got an L on our chimney, and to clean it, there's a little cap that you pull out so you can run your rod down from the roof, or you can go up, either way, but we typically go up and go down, and that's where all your stuff falls out of. And this was 2 winters ago.
And being near the water, the
little tabs that keep the cap up in there had rusted, and that cap had fallen out. And so we were getting a ton of smoke in the cabin, and we were like, what the hell's going on? So we went outside, and luckily we have wet, we live in down a rainforest, so everything's always pretty wet. But luckily...
for us, we do, because...
Yeah, some ambers had gotten out and fallen onto our deck and had burnt a little hole. Well, not a hole, but had a little burn mark, 2 of them about that big around.
So that same scenario could happen to us very easily.
Yeah, it could have easily been us.
Thank God we live in the rainforest.
Yeah.
And our wood was wet, and, it gave us enough time to figure out what was going on. But that same scenario could have very well happened to us. So it could get scary.
And so I didn't talk about this in the video, or maybe I did, but I forgot. But another thing with rural cabins is, at least from our experience, is that they're hard to insure. So if you get a bank note to do this, or even if you get owner financing, like the guy who previously owned your cabin finances you to buy the cabin, you're still going to have insurance on your cabin. And with that being said, a lot of insurance company, I think I did talk about this, that they won't even cover, because when I called up, like we
found one place to cover us, and it was astronomical. We paid,
it was like $2,000 a year.
Oh, I don't know. It was astronomical. And, they said they really wanted, for us to have two forms of heating. One being non-firewood.
So
because of accidents like ours, his.
But it's hard to find. Like your State Farm, your USAA.
They won't even do
all
it.
These guys ain't going to do it. You're going to have to find some like little tiny, like they specialize in remote living type deals, because when we called them, they were like, well, how close is the nearest fire department? I was like, well, we don't even live in a town, so there's no fire department. They're like, we're not going to insure you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool, thanks. No, I love USA, being a former soldier and retiree. I was like, but come on, USA.
Babe.
Hook your clientele up. I mean, come on. But yeah, so we just wanted to throw that out there, let you guys ponder
Accidents
on it.
happen.
Yeah.
You gotta be ready for them.
All right. Well, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next weekend, next Sunday. Bye.
Bye.